Thank you very much. I do have a few questions, and just I want to have a brief discussion about some of the things that you brought up today from the various speakers. And thank you for the practical input here. It seems that we are working in the realm of developing strong role models. I kind of want to just summarize, so make sure I've heard what you've been trying to communicate. And that also we need outreach to families because that's a huge indicator. And if the family stays STEM illiterate, we're going to have trouble getting that young woman through the system. So family outreach is another involvement, engagement, another big issue. And then we need strongly supported educators. And they're really critical, our teachers in the classroom. We've got to get more support to them, more resources to them. And that your point there about the core curriculum really focusing on some of these issues. I do know we have the next generation science standards that are going to be rolled out in the next few years. Not sure if that is a particular focus. There is an opportunity there, I think. To maybe make it more of a focus so that it does become part of our core curriculum throughout all of our grades. But also, you touched on the importance of confidence, for girls to develop confidence, the benefit of girls studying with other girls in an all-girl environment, and how that can be very beneficial. So one question I wanted to ask the panel is, where do you feel most girls are off-ramping? We talked a little bit about the issue that they start curious, but then at some point, somehow it wanes. Could you just give me your ideas on that?
Yeah, part of the reason why at Career Girls we time our intervention to target girls ages between 10 to 13 is the American Association of University Women did a study, Why So Few? And their research showed that boys and girls have complete parity in terms of interest and aptitude in math and science until fourth grade, when girls start to fall behind. Some of the reasoning is the peer pressure, but their research showed that if girls can see women who are working in fields that utilize math and science, then they're much more likely to stay on track academically. So hence, that's why we really try and get our offering in at least video role models to girls at that age range.
It's interesting that at such an early age, they're making a judgment call about the relevance of their education. Because that's really what you're saying, is that if girls can't visualize it, they're maybe not going to be as engaged. Yeah. But if they can visualize it, that might be that push to stay engaged. Yes?
I'll speak to at least what I've observed from a higher education level as far as what I've seen as a PhD student here at Davis. And that I think that one of the limiting factors is this idea of a glass ceiling, right? That as we're highly trained, technically trained, and there's a lot of intellectual capital that's out there. But we've got to have women that are in positions of leadership, right, and in positions of influence. And whether that be at academic institutions or within biotech fields, I think if we've got women that are in decision-making roles, then that does nothing but assists in the upward mobility of trainees as they look to expand their careers.
Thank you. One issue that I would like you to also maybe just discuss with me for a minute, and I will mention that my daughter, who is a science teacher, got her credential at UC Davis, and they have an outstanding science teaching credential program that other institutions should model after, because you talked about that importance of teacher support and really developing the strong teachers who are in the classroom. But one concern I've had as I've observed young women and kind of the move we have today, which is, career academies are very powerful. They're very concrete. They're showing our young women that there are real careers at the end of this, and that there's a way for them to visualize that career. But I'm very concerned about when they enter university. And I have some firsthand experience of this with my own daughters, and that is that the university majors tend to have a very narrow funnel that everyone needs to go through, and that's chemistry. You even want to go into life sciences, you got to get this chemistry class. And I feel if you could just speak a little bit to the culture, perhaps at our university campuses, because I feel that we sometimes raise the hopes and position students to want this, and in their freshman or sophomore year, they're just like, I can't make it through, because there's a culture. And I am going to nail chemistry departments, because I think the life sciences and the bio departments have adapted. But there really is this attitude of separating the sheep from the goats. I want my future research assistants to pass my class, and these other students, I don't know that I want to have to work with them for another year. And they'll say things. I mean, professors will literally say, you need to drop this class. You know, to young women, you aren't cut out for this. How do we address the issue of our university educators understanding that they're there to support and educate, and maybe not just select the brightest students to mentor forward, but to actually bring everyone along?
Well, I would say at UC Davis we have the Campus from the Advanced Initiative with NC WIT, and that has just raised the level of awareness amongst everyone on our campus. And then we have different women in tech organizations, women in physical science and mathematics, different organizations on campus which are mentoring, because it's still, I think it comes back to that mentoring piece and that role model piece at really any level you're at. And I think that's why Forbes magazine just said we were #1, because we do have a lot of those things already in place at our campus.
Would you like to speak to that at all?
Sure, certainly. So I've participated for close to 5 years as a teaching assistant in lab science courses. And so I've worked really closely with undergraduates that are kind of experiencing the same sorts of difficult things that you spoke of. That's tough for, you know, a 20-something to be able to wrap their mind around. And I think that really it's a network of support that's crucial. Certainly we need to have cultural change as far as ensuring that we're not perpetuating these negative messages, especially from the role of an instructor of a course. That's a really harmful thing to have happen. But I think that if we can build a broad base of support, and teaching assistants, I think, play a role in that, right, where we have maybe a little bit more of a close relationship with students and can engage with them in kind of a relationship around their learning, right, and pay attention to the content, certainly, and mastery of the content, but also pay attention to their feelings around the learning process, you know. And I think if we can do that as teaching assistants and also amongst peer groups, and really dialogue about the process as well as the outcome, then that can be a way that we can accomplish getting at some of these maybe more nuanced or sometimes not nuanced difficulties surrounding chemistry or physics or some of these really hard things that are tough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I my hope is that universities will maybe look at how they construct their majors, that they'll maybe update them and realize that there can be more flexibility, and that some of these departments, you know, I think the ivory tower syndrome can, and I understand totally, it's all about, you know, let's prep them for med school. Not everyone's going to med school. Not everyone's on that track. And I think there could be an understanding and kind of an increased diversity in how we approach in higher ed someone following through a STEM track. So I'm hopeful that's something that we can continue to work on as well. But thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure, as I looked at my notes, that we touched on everything here. And you know, I think we did. But any closing comments that the panel would like to make?
I would just like to underscore what Grace was saying in terms of that peer-to-peer support. You know, I mean, in courses throughout my life, continuing ed even, to have that sort of esprit de corps.
Yes.
That we're going to get through a course with a difficult instructor, I think is really, really important. And then also, one of the things, I mean, we target young girls, so we understand that gatekeepers are really important. And that whole piece of educating parents and letting them understand their role in how they can support a girl's journey on, to STEM, I think it is really, really key, making sure they're at the table.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that in our push, and hopefully this will change 10, 15 years from now, but, you know, as we're kind of breaking new ground and trying to get more new students interested, it's the support factor, and as you said, the peer support, but also institutional and departmental support, outside organization support is so critically important, because not everyone arrives at university with the same background. Some students are severely disadvantaged in their science curriculum or their public school education that perhaps they've had, and we have to be really committed to, I think, coming alongside and helping them. So thank you for focusing on that, and thank you for your success stories. Really encouraged by what's happening. It's so good. 15 years ago, this wasn't even being talked about. When my daughter, I took her to college, we were looking on a tour, and I distinctly remember we sat in the parking lot of the university she went to, and we had the handbook, and we're like, well, what are you going to major in? And, I'm a teacher, so that would be an easy thing. And she goes, I don't know what I want to do. And we looked through it, and I said, well, how about biology? And it was, we didn't have any idea, and we're, an educated family, but we didn't really know what that would mean for her or what were the jobs she could end up doing, and that seemed like a little bit of a strange, choice for a major. That was just 15 years ago. So I'm so impressed that, the conversation has changed so dramatically in that space of time, and that so many women are really championing this for younger women behind them. Thank you so much, the panel.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Amy now, Hirotaka, coming up from code.org.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, okay. All good?
We're going to show that technology works.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Amy Hirotaka, and I'm the Director of State Government Affairs at code.org. I'm going to speak a little bit about what's happening across the country and how California is taking steps to expand computer science throughout the state. Great. First, a little background on code.org. Launched in 2013, code.org is a nonprofit dedicated to expanding access to computer science and increasing participation by women and underrepresented students of color. Our vision is that every student in every school should have the opportunity to learn computer science. We believe it should be part of the core curriculum alongside other courses such as biology, chemistry, or algebra. Code.org increases diversity in computer science by reaching students of all backgrounds where they are, at their skill level, in their schools, and in ways that inspire them to keep learning. The fields of software, computing, and computer science are plagued by a tremendous underrepresentation of women, African Americans, and Hispanics. In high school, the Advanced Placement Computer Science exam has the worst gender diversity across all courses. And this is 78% participation by men and 22% by women. So as we heard, it's actually a little better in California, which is encouraging. Participation nationally by students of color is 13%. But when we put these underrepresented groups together, they actually comprise 65% of the U.S. population. The problem extends into the software workplace, which suffers a similar lack of diversity. Obviously, there are many issues to address to solve the entire problem of diversity in the tech workforce, from unconscious bias in hiring or retention practices or capacity building in university programs. Our focus is primarily on K-12 learning, which is where the diversity problem begins. And folks have already given a few stats about women in AP computer science. And Assemblywoman Bonilla, as you shared yesterday, for example, Black and Hispanic students who try AP computer science in high school are actually 7 to 8 times more likely to major in it in college. Most importantly, we think that computer science is foundational for all 21st century careers, making access to this knowledge an equity issue that we must address at the state and local level. So these are our diversity numbers at code.org across all of our programs. As you can see, we have 45% representation from female students, 48% from underrepresented minority students, and 47% students on free and reduced meal programs. And we're always striving to make this better. Nationally, 9 out of 10 parents want their students to take computer science, but only 1 out of 4 schools teach it. And another interesting stat that I like to share is that 56% of teachers think it should be required for graduation. These numbers are not surprising when you think about the opportunity that computer science can provide a student. Oops, did I go too far? Okay. Code.org's advocacy work focuses on working with states to implement policies to expand access to computer science education. In the last 2 years, over 20 states have implemented these policies, and this is because of a groundswell of support from students, parents, teachers, administrators, legislators, and governors. So when we look at what we like to see in states, not all of these goals that I have up here on the screen are appropriate for every state, and certainly not all of them are feasible necessarily or doable in California, but I wanted to share them because there are a lot of states working towards these. The first is defining computer science and establishing standards, then allocating funding for rigorous computer science professional development and course support, implementing clear teacher certification pathways, creating incentives at institutions of higher education to offer programs to pre-service teachers, establishing a dedicated computer science position in state and local education authorities, and requiring all secondary schools to offer computer science with appropriate implementation timelines. Allowing computer science to count for a core math or science graduation requirement for graduation and college admission is also a great way to increase the numbers. So in 28 states plus the District of Columbia, computer science can count towards a high school math or science graduation requirement, which is up from 12 states in 2013. You'll see that California is colored in because of the bill 1764 that passed in 2014. There have been some implementation issues, which I think that folks might touch on later when we talk about how to fit computer science into the school day. So now I'd love to share what's happening in other states and then come back to California just so that to give you an idea of what's going on across the country. So a couple of weeks ago, Idaho House Bill 379 was signed by Governor Otter. And what this bill does is establish a computer science initiative and funds it with $2 million through the Governor's STEM Action Center. This money will go to professional development for teachers and course implementation and support. And it does create a dedicated computer science program manager position to implement the grant program and oversee all aspects of the initiative. An interesting thing about this bill is that it strongly encourages partnership with industry and also creates an online repository of resources for teachers. Looking at Washington State, House Bill 1813 was signed into law last year, and it required the writing of standards, which is in progress. And there's also a single subject teacher certification process in progress as well. The first round of grant funding, which was the big part of the bill, has been awarded. And that's interesting because it's a grant program that has a one-to-one private industry match between the state and philanthropy and industry. And they partnered with a nonprofit called Washington STEM, and all of the applications from school districts needed to have an emphasis on underserved populations in rural and urban areas. Arkansas is a really interesting bill, and the bill number is 1183, which actually has all the same numbers as the Washington bill, but it's just a coincidence. And it also passed in 2015. So the Department of Ed created lightweight standards to ensure computer science could be taught in every high school because that's what the bill required. It required within that year to implement computer science in all high schools across the state. And they did manage to do it for the 2015-2016 school year. The coolest part of this is that they saw a 300% increase in females taking computer science and a 600% increase in African American females taking computer science, simply because there was access in every high school for these students. Moving on to California, right now there are a few things happening. This certainly isn't everything, but there are stakeholders working on better aligning computer science, as I spoke about, with University of California A to G requirements. And this is something that's sort of an ongoing process. And it's a struggle that happens in many states. How do we fit computer science into the school day? How do we encourage students to take it? Right now, also, there's the expansion of computer science courses throughout the state through code.org, Exploring Computer Science, and others. And we do have 2 bills. One is 2329. Thank you, Assemblywoman Bonilla, for your leadership. And the other is 2275, both aimed at expanding computer science in a meaningful way. A little bit about code.org in California. We have partnerships with over 20 school districts, including LAUSD and Oakland Unified. So far, we've provided professional learning for 3,322 elementary school teachers, 64 middle school teachers, 71 high school teachers, and we're looking forward to training 230 more middle and high school teachers this summer. I did want to speak briefly about the federal White House Computer Science for All initiative and what has been proposed. So many of you have likely heard about this. A $4 billion funding package was announced for states, along with $100 million for districts and continued NSF funding. The $4 billion is pretty apparently a non-starter with Congress, but that doesn't mean that nothing will happen. There is a National Computer Science Education Coalition with membership from across industry and nonprofits that is urging Congress to fund a portion of the package, and the number that they're pushing for is $250 million. And that would be accessible to states like California, should 2329 pass, that have strategic initiatives in place and good plans for computer science. So again, 2329 would help capitalize on this opportunity. 2329 is also a great bill because it brings together various stakeholders working towards a common goal, which, as I talked about, we completely saw successfully work in both Washington and Idaho. And it also sets up the state for success for years to come by creating a multifaceted strategic plan with, again, a special focus on those underrepresented groups, particularly girls and students of color. So if there's one thing that I'd like everyone to take away from my presentation, it's that state policy changes are incredibly powerful when it comes to increasing diversity in computer science education. And I applaud you for taking on this work, and removing barriers to expanding computer science is so important. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. One thing that we know earlier, we were talking about how important families are for girls to be and stay engaged. But when we're talking a little bit now about the educational organization, the role of superintendents, school board members, and principals is so important. Their leadership on these issues. And I think this is something we are encountering. And do you have any efforts to, and you have a lot of teacher training, I think is wonderful, but do you have any efforts to develop leadership at the decision-making level within our public school districts?
We don't have a program where we would invite all superintendents, say, to a meeting to talk about computer science education. Computer science education has been part of the discussion that happens at the national superintendents meetings and the statewide superintendents meetings that happen. One thing that we are focusing on in a more meaningful way is actually school counselors, who have a great amount of influence over the courses that a student will take. As far as leadership in administration and state boards, we do work with them a lot. We just don't have a leadership training program or something like that. So I think, but I'm really glad that you pointed that out, because if you don't have investment and buy-in from those folks, you're not going to go anywhere. Yeah. You really need leadership from them. And they're smart, dedicated folks. They don't need much convincing. Sometimes you just need to talk to them a little bit about, for example, that all parents want their kids to take computer science, and they're very interested in making sure that these students all have that opportunity.
Yes, I think it's incredibly important. We looked at our local school boards that are elected bodies, and I think we have a lot of leadership potential that can be developed there to move this initiative, very important initiative, forward. And then I totally agree with you. Usually I believe our superintendents and principals are completely overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. We're asking them to do an enormous job, and we've pulled most of the support out from under them through budget cuts and what's been going on. But I do think it's a very important focus that because without that, as you said, we're never going to get this implemented except in the places where there is leadership vision and support. And there's so many teachers who would love to do programs, but they have an apathetic principal or just an overworked principal, and they can't get a new program established in that school. And that's so frustrating. So anything that, any of the various interested organizations can do to really focus on leadership training at those decision-making levels, I think would be incredibly impactful and kind of really open the channel quite a lot for in the areas where it isn't currently happening. Because we all know we have great, perfect models of great leadership and where it's going really well, but we always are concerned here at the state, and how do we scale it? How do we make it available in all of our districts? How do we help the struggling district, develop leadership around the issue of computer science implementation and the issue of girls in this? So I think that would be great.
Thank you. That's really valuable insight. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I think what you said there about the power of policy also really true, very important. I listened to your presentation, and it's like, I just want to mandate computer science in every classroom. Like, why aren't we doing it? Why haven't we done it? How could it possibly be 2016? And, we're still dealing with schools that don't have, proper, technical situations, and we have been working slowly but surely, and I do want to at least mention that there has been funding here in California that has been directed in the last 3 years into technology, because you can't have a computer science class if you can't get online with your computer. And so that's something we've been wrestling with, money for the last mile, making sure our schools are actually connected some way, somehow, and then making sure they have the right bandwidth, that it actually functions. And so I would say we're setting the pieces in place to actually say now it should be curriculum. We've started with the testing portion with AB 484, saying now we're doing computer adaptive testing and putting money out in our one-time funds to say buy the technology, start using it in the classroom, train your teachers. So I feel like we're almost at the tipping point in California, but we've got to push it over, and hopefully this hearing and your involvement in the room here will help that happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on now to our second panel. Ask you to come and take a seat, and we'll start with Joey Freeman, the Chief Policy Consultant for Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.